All right. So the whole purpose of this morning, Brian and I were talking about this is our technical mastery call. So what we like to do is we like to get into things that you can do in your practice to make your practice better, whether it's technique, whether it's procedures, some of the how. So what I said, when we were talking back and forth is I would love to go over a few points this morning to help you guys to really start to take a high level look at your practice, analyze your procedures to make things more efficient. A lot of times we get stuck in our own bottleneck and we can't grow, not because we don't have enough new patients, but because our systems are the main limiting factor. So when we can start to analyze systems and start having a different perspective on perhaps there's ways to do things better and more efficiently, then all of a sudden it gets much easier. So we're going to go through a few points this morning. Brian's going to chime in through this. And if you guys have points that you are using that you have found make things more efficient for you, please share because it might be something that everybody needs to hear. So let's keep this very interactive this morning. So I've got a bunch of different things. So let's get into this. So starting right from the time that a new patient approaches your practice. So whether they come from a referral, whether they come from an ad, whether they come from an event that you're doing, it doesn't matter. There's ways to make this more efficient and limit the things that slow you down, whether it's no-shows, whether it's people changing their appointments, whatever the case is. One of the best things that I have found in practice myself, and of course coaching with a lot of clients and now with marketing is, and especially in the online world, if you can send your paperwork to a patient beforehand and get them to fill it out and submit it before they come in, it is huge for the follow through, the throughput, people showing up, eliminating no shows, and it speeds up your exam consultation process so that the digital forms, and again, if you're sending them PDFs that they have to print off, fill out, scan, send back to you, stop doing that. Like that is such a waste of time. Get a digital form if you don't already have one. It's so much easier and something that is phone friendly that people can fill out on their phone. And it doesn't even have to be your full paperwork. It can just be their information, a little bit of their history, like if it's an insurance case, whatever the case is, the details that you need that can help you lead to your big why questions to make the rapport and the relationship with that person. Whether it's the consent form, you can send that to them online, get all that beforehand. And if it's something, and I know a lot of you use Atlas or other patient management softwares that have those digital forms integrated directly, and then of course the information gets populated into your patient management software, that is huge. And if you don't have that, I would suggest looking into that because that is really worthwhile. And if you want to grow, putting that in place is huge. The next thing is, getting prepayment. Getting prepayment from patients is really worthwhile. Again, it's a commitment, and there's ways to do that. I mean, a lot of people are going to be resistant to that, especially if they're new and especially if they've come from an online ad. There's so many scams out there, but there are strategic ways to make the relationship with that person and get them to understand that prepayment is necessary. So we've got a lot of clients and a lot of other coaching clients who get prepayment very, very eloquently. And again, there's ways to do that, and we can talk about details on how to do that and how to script that if that's something you want to do, but I highly encourage it. And then here's the big thing, and this again is going to save you tons of time. To set up the virtual consultation before the patient actually shows up in your office, once they submit their paperwork, to either have a team member, and we always had a staff member that would do the consultations, or a doctor to call the person and actually ask them some strategic questions beforehand to find out about what they're going through and again, create more of a rapport and more of a relationship. Again, it's something else to help reduce no-shows, and it's huge in the conversion process because you're building trust and it saves you tons of time on your exam day. Okay. When the patient shows up, and I believe all you guys have this now, is you have the key fob check-in. So they're not, they check in at the desk and it's very, very automated. So all they do is they come and they swipe their key fob or their card. I would even say go so far as to take that swipe in or that sign in station and put it somewhere distant from the front desk. So they literally have no front desk interaction when they come and swipe in. And it saves time with your team because your team is dealing with either phone calls, recalls, or people that are checking out or managing concerns with other patients. If a patient's just coming in for their adjustment, they can go to a station that's at a distant part of your office, or maybe just as they walk in the front door without coming to the front desk, swipe in, and then if they've been trained properly, go and do their warm-ups and get ready for their, excuse me, for their visit. Okay. So again, something to consider. Any any other points on that? Is there something else during that time when you're initially meeting and greeting that patient or on their day one that you do in your office that can be effective?
The one big thing, if before anyone else, they're thinking of the other stuff that they can add, you want to be looking about how you make this process easy for people coming in. The more complicated it becomes, like Dr. Collin talking about, like having a form that you send to them, but they got to print it off and fill it out. Like you got to make the process easy. Otherwise, it's another reason for them not to follow through. So you want to think about, how does it become easy? How does it set you apart? How does this flow properly so that you can get down to what's really required, which is the exam, and the patient already has some confidence in you when they sit down, so you get bonding, you can get some open questions going from there.
One thing, and here's just kind of the general flow on that, is one thing I would suggest is the digital form is it's very concise. So you get their information, you get their reason why they're coming to the office, and and just a few very basic questions to help you understand what the problem is, and then they submit that. It's enough to start to bridge the gap and initiate some conversation. So then if you do that virtual consultation or the first consultation that's in the office, and we always had a team member do that. Like I always had a CA doing the first consultation. So the CA would take the time to find out about their complaint and all the details and whatnot, and then start to ask those strategic questions like, how is this affecting your life? What would your life look like if this problem wasn't there? Has anybody talked to you about why this problem is happening or the root cause of this problem? So at least we're planting that seed. So questions like that. But to have that system in place, and then the CA would actually have a more detailed history that she could then add to that initial digital history that the patient filled out. So again, we tried to make it very, very easy and very concise. Okay, so then we get to consultation and exam. And here's the thing is that we always involved our team. So it was a very team driven office. So my thinking, right, when I step back and look at this, my thinking is that I want to adjust people. That's what I'm good at. That's what I'm licensed to do. Nobody else in our office can adjust people. I want to adjust people. So anything beyond that was something that I wanted to delegate to team. So new patient comes in, so they have their initial interaction with the desk, and of course that was very strategic in the questioning and education that the patient got at the desk. The new patient tour, again, very strategic. Team did that. The initial consultation with that patient, team did that. So I wouldn't be involved in that examination consultation part until that patient had multiple touch points with the team and they were asking those strategic questions. So by the time I came into the room, I was very well informed on exactly why that patient was there, some of their hot button questions, what was lacking in their life because of this problem. So I would not get into any history at all with that person. I would just say that, hey, I would acknowledge it. I see you've come in here with this type of problem. It's affecting your life in this way. Is this something you'd like to get to the root cause of and have this problem corrected from the inside out? And I would ask questions like that and get their acknowledgement to then lead into my ability to then start the education process. If you don't mind, I'm going to show you this nervous system chart to show you exactly what we're going to do today. And they would acknowledge it and say yes. And I would get right into the fact that you have this God given healing power that starts in your brain and spinal cord and flows through all the nerves, and talk about subluxation. So it was really, really efficient. But what it did was it allowed me to spend minimal time in that examination. So I could get in there, be very, very concise and very intentional, and then be back out so I could start adjusting again. Okay. So we use the intake form and try to avoid the symptom rabbit hole. And this is one thing that are slowing you guys down so much is you start talking about symptoms and you actually give the person the microphone to start just talking about all of their pain and problems and blah 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 blah. It's so draining on everybody. So what we want to try to talk about is the root cause and what would life be like when this problem gets corrected. When you're doing your exam, for those of you who are still doing orthopedic tests, this is something that absolutely has to change. And again, I know you're thinking, Well, my college is making me do this. Well, this is what I learned in school, all this stuff, but it serves no purpose in spinal correction. It serves absolutely no purpose to do a chems test or a straight leg raise just to say, is this painful, and have no objective measurement. There's no value in that at all. So my suggestion is start using tests during your exam that give you quantifiable data that you can then compare later to show the patient that their body is changing, to show them that the adjustments that you're making are making some objective change. And it's something that
One,
you would do on your
I'm gonna
re-exam.
say one thing I can say there for the Ontario docs, and back when I was first in BC, I can tell you those provinces at least do not require orthopedic tests. They do require objective findings, and there's a list you can pick from. So I'd look into that. The tendency is because where most of us have been trained was to do the orthopedic test, but like Colin says, there's virtually no value to that other than pain or no pain, which isn't what we're taking care of in the first place. So do look into that. I've been reviewed. I'm sure most of the docs, Justine can speak to this as well. You don't need an orthopedic test in Ontario. And when I was in BC, you didn't need it there as well. But you do need, I think it's 3 or 4 objective measures that you're using. And I would look to use other ones outside of orthopedic tests.
So again, I'll leave it up to you. You got to figure out what you can add and what you can delete from your procedures to make yourself more efficient. I chose to delete it 100%, and in 30 years of practice, never had an issue. So it's up to you guys. So, and I tried to make it very, our exam was very thorough and it was very effective. And, we had incredible, great sign-ons and great responses. And so this is something that you guys have to figure out what works for you. And I would say get your team involved in the exam. So we had one CA do the tour and the consultation. I would do my initial consultation and my initial part of the exam, and then another CA would do the rest of the exam. And that included like the thermal scan that we did, getting them set up for x-rays, any type of measurement, like bilateral scales that we did, posture checking. So, and I was not involved in that at all, at all. So these are things, again, as you want to grow, you put these things in place to allow you to have more time to adjust people. That was it. Okay, so next one. So then you get to the sign on. So whether you're doing, and I know some of you are still doing one-on-one report of findings, and some of you are doing doctor's report and report of findings, some of you are using videos, whatever that is, there's ways to, again, make this more efficient. So I would say if you're doing one-on-ones, you want to try to systematize the patient education. So obviously using a video on it, whether it's a day 2 video or a pre-report of findings video, so that you give them some consistent information that they understand before they see their own exam findings, x-rays, scans, whatever that might be, or even a series of pamphlets. I mean, we had that 6-day pamphlet that we used for many, many years, and you can modify it however you want, but the patient would get some level of education every single day they came in, starting at day 1, day 2, day 3, and so on. And again, remember the DR, if you're doing a DR or a group report, it needs to focus on objection management. Well, why is that? Because if your stories and your teaching and inspiring through that doctor's report can plant the seed of objections before they come up, you save yourself tremendous time. It's really, really important. And I mean, you pretty much know what all those objections are. It's the time, it's the money. Will this hurt? I didn't budget for this. There's all kinds of them that you can put in place. And if you do that well, you're going to have great closings and it's going to be efficient. By the time they look at their own x-rays and exams and you present a care plan to them, in most cases, it's like, yes, here's my credit card if you're doing it well, consistently. Don't repeat yourself during the closing. If your doctor's report is good, or if your pre-education, your pre-report education is good, you shouldn't have to go and repeat yourself. So a lot of people do the doctor's report, then they get into the room and they start teaching all over again. And it's just such a waste of time. So the key is that questions keep you in control. And we've gone over this many times, is when you're showing a set of x-rays or scans or objective findings, questioning is the key. You don't want to reteach it. You just want to ask questions. And even if they don't know it, you ask strategic questions to get them to the obvious answer. And this is huge because, again, it keeps you in control. It keeps the conversation directed where you want to go. And when you ask questions and the patient has to process it, they then understand, they get it. And then when they can answer that question, you solidify it in their mind. It's really vital. Any other points on that, on the report of findings, doctor's report, something that's really helping you guys? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Day four, we always found we spent so much time training on day four. And when I say day four, this was the teaching the patient the systems of our office. So I wanted to make sure that my adjusting was very efficient, especially when we were in our busiest times. You know, my goal was I wanted to see about 40 people an hour without getting too far behind. And so to do that, we had to make sure that everybody understood that I don't have time to sit and ask questions with them. I don't have time to wait for them to lie on the table. I don't have time to, to spend a lot of time with them during those visits. And as long as they were educated properly and they knew that going into it, it worked fantastic. And we would set time aside for those patients that needed it during their re-exams or during special appointments, or if I had to make a phone call or whatnot after the shift. So this is the day of patient education of the flow, the day four. So we're going to start to manage their expectations. So that was part of the teaching is that, Dr. Collin doesn't have time to spend with you during your regular visits to ask a lot of questions. Typically, you're going to be spending less than 2 minutes with him during that time. And so let's realize that. And they would be explained to them that if you need extra time, we will set extra time up for you, but your current adjustment time is not the time to do that. So they understood that. And we would teach them about the check-in, how to take their number. We had a number system, and we taught them how the number system worked. Like if they came in and they got the number and then they had to go to the bathroom, there was all these things that the staff managed to make sure that the flow was good. So we would teach them their warm-up exercises and how to be ready for the adjustment, or how to be ready for when the table is empty for them to go to the table and be ready. We were really adamant that people needed to be lying down in position. I like to see them prone. So I always started prone. And in fact, I got to the point where all of my adjustments were prone. So I would do a prone thoracic, a prone drop, and then typically prone cervical adjustments. And that way I'm not waiting for the patient to move around on the table, because when they're lying in prone position, then you get them on their side and they got, especially if it's somebody who's in a lot of discomfort, takes a while to get on their side and get them all set up for that adjustment, and then to the other side and then back on their back. So you spend most of that time waiting for them to move around. So I just got to the point where I was adjusting everybody prone and they wouldn't have to move at all during that adjustment. Really be intentional about your doctor greeting. Dr. Justine did a great training on this in Calgary a couple of years ago where we talked about greetings for the patient, as opposed to walking into the adjusting area or your adjusting room and saying, "Hey, how are you doing? How are you feeling?" And then all of a sudden the floodgates open up, and they actually tell you. And then you go, "Oh, I'm sorry I asked," because it takes so much time. Or they're lying down and you ask them, "Hey, how are you doing?" They're, "Oh, let me get up and talk to you." And then they start getting up on the table. So we really have to, again, be very intentional with our questioning. So what I would often do is I would have a story of the day or a story of the week. And I would talk about some miraculous thing that happened in our practice. Maybe it was with a kid, or maybe it was somebody that came in with a non-musculoskeletal problem. Maybe it was a serious disease or a neurological problem that had great response with their chiropractic care. And I would say, I'd walk into the room and say, "Hey, Bob, great to see you. I got a fantastic story I want to share with you." And I would actually start my adjustment and tell this story as I'm adjusting them. So think about that. If you're walking into the room and you're asking, "How are you?" all the time, it's slowing you down. Have your defaults set up in your software. So again, if you're using computer software, very simple for that patient, program the default. And typically we would do this from re-exam to re-exam. It would be a new default. So if I wanted to change their adjustment, I would have the team set it up in the software. And then all I would do is load default and post. That was it. It would be a couple of buttons on the software. So I wasn't sitting there trying to make notes or whatever else. Face paper. So make sure that your patients know that it's their responsibility to change their face paper and get the table ready for the next patient. That's just part of being a member of our practice. It's their responsibility. Clean up after themselves. So change the face paper, and we would have the sanitary stuff there to wipe down the table if they decided to do that. And we showed them how to do that. We actually taught them how to do that. So they would do that for the next person. And then even going so far to say it on our day four is we would explain that, hey, we encourage everybody to do that, and we expect everybody to do that. But there are some people who may forget or may choose not to do it. So please be aware that you may have to go to the table and clean up after the last person who was there before you lay down on the table. So people, again, expected it, but they took it upon themselves to make it their responsibility. Questions in doctor interaction. We made sure that the people knew that during their adjustment time, that did not happen. It just didn't happen. And I'd be so firm to say that if a question came up, I say, hey, that's a fantastic question. I'd love to give you the time to answer that. Please go to the front desk and arrange a time, or let's set up a call and I can call you about that. So, so I wouldn't entertain it. And I was very firm on that because I knew that if I did it, it would open the door for them to do it. And then if somebody else heard me answering a question, then of course it would open the door for them to answer questions. So I just made a conscious decision not to take questions during adjusting time. It was, in my opinion, it was a sacred time that I was there to be completely focused with every single person I was laying my hands on. And I didn't want anything to disrupt my flow. So, and we just told the patient that, you know, if I've got your neck, your cervical spine in my hands, I want to be completely present with what I'm doing. I don't want to be distracted by questions or thinking about other things at that time.
Well, I'd like to give a strategy there, just having new associates coming from a different model into our office. Um, I want to talk about this a little bit and how you explain it to patients. Again, everything should always be driven in their best, like in their best interest. So a big thing with this that we talk to patients about, that the adjustment room, just like Dr. Collins said, is for adjustments. If you have a question, you can by all means ask it, but if it's going to require more information or a longer process, it's going to get moved into a sit down time outside a shift, or it might be through email. And we explain to them how they get in contact with the doctor so they have complete access. It just may not be a long conversation during adjustment time. And the reason that that's explained, and so like patients even know, like they may be like, I have a question for you. And just because of my pattern, where I always say, you know, let me adjust you first, and they might ask me at the end. Like most of them know, I have a question for you. I'll ask you when we're done. So you develop that pattern, but patients are explained that if they have a question, our concern would be that there's something more detailed they need. And they could either get a quick response in the adjusting area, because the focus is on delivering adjustments and being respectful of everybody's time, or they could get a proper, more complete answer if we book the proper one-on-one sit-down time, or the doctor may want to send you something through email. So there's the documents or the links or whatever that is. So when you start to understand as to why it's to patient benefit not to have that, because like a training we do in our office is how slow adjustments damage patients. Because if your like brain's going 10 different directions, you have a conversation about nutrition over here, it turns into 10 minutes, all of a sudden there's, you know, 7 people waiting, so now you're rushing, you're not going to deliver the best adjustment you could. So just from a mindset point of view, I want you to think about that and how it's in patient's interest to do that. I know Dr. Collin did it. This is exactly how we do it in my office, and patients are very happy. The only thing they typically clarify, they're like, hey, they want to know what email is my email, so that goes directly to me. That's typically the only thing they want to clarify, because if they're sharing stuff that they feel is more confidential, they don't necessarily want that going through the front desk all the time.
So here's another tip on that. And we got to the point where, you know, in having children, so you want to make sure that you know, as your practice grows, you don't want it to consume your time. You still want to have that boundary to have your family time. So when my wife, after we had our fourth, and she wanted to maintain her busy practice, and she was seeing around 400 people a week, but she cut her practice down to 2 days. And so to see 400 people in 2 days a week was, I mean, it was a challenge. So what we did is we actually trained a CA to follow her around. And she would literally go right into the adjusting area with Kim, and Kim would not touch the computer at all. The CA would take all the notes, and Kim would just seriously, like her chiropractic talk, her TikTok, if you will, at the table was specifically what she was adjusting and any particular notes that she wanted the CA to type into the computer. And then if the patient had a question, she would defer the question to Lisa, was her name. She'd say, okay, Lisa's going to talk to you about that question. Hopefully you get the right answer. If you need to me to talk to you personally, we can set up a special time for that. So they knew that those conversations are not going to happen at the table, and Lisa would take over those conversations, and Kim would be off to adjust the next person while Lisa was dealing with that. And then Lisa would go and catch up at the next table. So it worked out really well. And she could still see, she had a 5 hour shift. She could still see those 200 people in those 5 hours, give or take a half an hour here or there, to keep things really, really efficient in that time. But it was all a case of just setting up the right structure and systems to manage all that. So questions in doctor interaction. That one. And the last thing is when, and again, we talked about this on day 4, is we talked about the whole checkout procedure. So after the adjustment, what happens? Chains of paper, clean the table, all that stuff, and then the checkout. We made sure that every single person in our office was prepaid. Like, we did not take pay as you go. We just didn't. And even people that balked at it, we would make some sort of arrangement where they would maybe pay for the week up front, or we'd have some sort of a credit card or payment on file. Or if they didn't have that, we would take cash and say, okay, well, how about you just pay for your 3 adjustments? So we tried to minimize the interaction for people having to stop. All the appointments were pre-booked. So nobody was stopping after their adjustment or their appointment to book their next appointment. They were on a care plan. And at least what we did is we said we had a plan to say we would do it from re-exam to re-exam at least. If they were not booked for the entire year, because we did 12-month care plans, we would have them booked at least till their next re-exam. And then at that re-exam, we would book them till their next re-exam. So everything was all pre-booked. And again, people were explained that if they did have insurance, we could provide insurance receipts. We would do that to their email upon request only. So that wasn't a given thing, but it would be like a system that we had where they would have to request those insurance receipts, and then we would email them to them. And typically that would happen after the shift was over. The CA would get that done.
One thing you can also do for those of you who use Atlas, you can program it automatically. So we tell patients that most people, and I'm not sure that most people do, but our terminology is most people like these on a monthly basis. So it's something you can set in at the end of every month. It just sends out their entire statement. The patients want it. Some people want it more frequently, but we tell them most people like it on a monthly basis. So more people likely select on a monthly basis unless the budget's really tight. So Atlas can automatically send us an email. So it's hands off from your team most of the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Automate whatever you can. So then when we start talking about scheduling and patient flow, again, make sure they're pre-booked at least till their next re-exam. And I would say to you guys, like, so let's say right now you're booking whatever it is, 10 people an hour, 12 people an hour, 3 every 15 minutes or 4 every 15 minutes, 16 and 5 every 15 minutes, 20 an hour. During your busy times, and you're going to know when those busy times are, Monday nights, Wednesday nights, whatever, between 4 and 6, that type of thing. When people get off work, they're coming to your office. That's when your busy times are. Book it up. Like, force yourself to move faster. And 2 things happen. First of all, it's busy. Like, you feel the energy in your office. There's more people there. There's people that are coming in. You've got, 10 people, 12 people in your hot seats waiting to be adjusted. You have to keep up. So it forces you to minimize your conversation. And here's the other thing. People see that you're busy. So in most cases, it's not 100%, but in most cases, people know you're busy, so they're going to be very efficient. They're not going to sit there and ask you questions. They're going to realize they have to be lying down. And I would even say to you, if you walk into an adjusting area and you've educated them that they need to lie down beforehand, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'm going to give you a minute to lie down. I'm going to go adjust the next person. So go ahead and lie down and I'll be right back. Like, that's going to train them. If they're sitting up waiting for you, but they've been told they need to lie down, enforce it. Like, don't give into that. So use your huddles. And we always say, in huddle, this is one of the things we talked about. We went over every single person that was coming in that day, and we always were aware of the people who took more time. So the chatty Cathy. So we wanted to make sure that, we were all, so the staff would know when chatty Cathy came in, they would either escort chatty Cathy, or they would help chatty Cathy, or they would address any questions chatty Cathy had and remind them that, hey, Dr. Collins really busy today. So if you need extra time, we will arrange that at a different time. So they were on point with that. And then we also talked about creating incentives for patients to come at slower times. So you have retired people who can come any time of the day. Well, there's no point in somebody who's totally retired to come at 5 p.m. on a Wednesday night when it's jam-packed busy. So maybe you give them an incentive to say, hey, we're going to give you a 10% discount on any product, or we're going to charge you a lesser fee or a lesser care plan fee, or take a few percent points off your care plan if you can book your appointments at 10:30 in the morning or 11 in the morning or whatever, some time when it's not as busy and you're not jammed up. Any other points on flow?
The only piece I would say on flow is you just want to look at like you're trying to get rid of any repetitiveness. So like even the direction your tables are and stuff like that, like I have them positioned so I know where I end my adjustment, where I start my next adjustment. So it's the least amount of steps that I need to take. So it's all these little things. In business, they call them choke points. So the things that maybe you've gotten into a pattern of, but it's maybe not the most efficient use of your time. You want to be thinking about like what's like Dr. Collins was touched on that, like what's the biggest value you bring to the patient, and how do you spend more time doing that thing by removing all of the other stuff where you're not delivering value.
And I would say any little thing that you can think of, even these little details, make such a big difference for you to, and you have to set the foundation for you to grow. You can't wait till you grow and then make the change. You have to set the foundations in place to grow, to open up the space for more people to be coming into your practice.
I,
Billings and payments.
can I just add to that,
Yeah,
Colin? Um,
please.
I believe everything should be within an arm's length, and I got short arms compared to you guys. So things like headrest paper, a family health pass, a bone model, anything that you think you might use, a baby blanket, a baby toy. I have in every room. A stretch sheet. I don't want to go looking for them, or I want things to be so, as again, efficient. So I want everything that I could grab within an arm's reach.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about billings and payments. And again, and I've got here eliminate the pay as you go model. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like that is a practice killer. And it's just it comes down to your education process, and it comes down to your ability to communicate the benefit of getting on some sort of a care plan with the patient. So try to get good at that, because that is absolutely a practice killer when you start accepting pay as you go patients. Or if you're trying to promote a care plan and backing off and then giving in to people who only want to pay as you go, it's a cancer in your office. So I would say, put your procedures in place, be firm on that. That is, and bend but don't break. Like if for people who don't want to get on a care plan and they just absolutely won't, instead of saying no, you can't have care here, figure out something. Like whether it's maybe can we do a weekly plan? Can you pay in advance for the next 6 adjustments? Whatever that is, it keeps them committed, and it makes it so much easier on your team and your efficiency. So make sure that those payments are. Go ahead, Justine.
Then many of the new insurance companies require a visa statement that's per visit. How are people getting around having the visa statement at the end of the month? Or because they actually want the little slip, they want a picture of the little slip right now. And we're getting more of those. And I'm trying to figure out a way around creating a little visa slip on a pay per visit basis, or even at the beginning of the week. I've tried somewhere, okay, pay for 3 at the beginning of the week, and the insurance company doesn't reimburse them because they don't have 3 visa slips. So I'm interested in the solution to that, and the solution to in the last month, many of the insurance companies, MVA companies, have moved their adjusting rate to $46 or $47 per adjustment, no longer covering, your $60 an adjustment for MVA.
So I'll give you what we do. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so um, we use Atlas. Through Atlas, we've moved our payment processor to Global Payments. Slightly more expensive than the deal I had with Moneris. But with that, you capture the credit card. It's in Atlas. So all my team has to do is press a button and it's processed. There is no slip. The slip is inside our EHR. So we've had a lot of those requests, and we simply have a form letter that goes along that our EHR is what processes the payment automatically. So we are providing you a doctor signed receipt, and we can do a paid in full receipt. We have many different types of receipts that Atlas will print out, and the paid in full just shows the day they were here, and the amount they paid is the exact same as the charge. If we're giving that to a patient who is on a installment plan, we have them sign a document to let them know that we're giving that to them for insurance purposes so they can properly claim their insurance. It does not mean that their account is a zero balance. So they autograph that so we're covered. and we give that to them so the insurance is covered. So we just tell them, I'm like, a visa slip, we don't have them. It goes through our EHR. As far as the MVA stuff goes, we've chosen to opt out of FISC or whatever the heck the thing's called. So we just tell patients, we'll fill out all the paperwork. We have no problem. You pay our fee and they'll pay you. So we avoid the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the reasons we do that, like I'm opted out of WSIB, MVA stuff, is because exactly it creates this issue when you're inside the insurance piece where you're incentivized to provide the care that the insurer wants to provide. So we just tell people, I'm like, we're just of the mindset that I don't want to give you, I don't want to recommend to you what the insurance company wants to pay for. You're going to get my best recommendation, and then we'll give you all the paperwork, but you can solve that with your insurance company. We'll work with you, but we want to make sure you're getting the care you need, not just what your insurance company recommends, because they have no idea what your health is.
100%. And we did the same thing, is that we wanted 100% cash practice. For that reason, is that we didn't want to be dictated by a third party payer on what we could do or what we could bill to that patient. So patients got their own reimbursement and we provided all the receipts for them. And here's the other thing on that, psychologically wise, is that when the insurance company stops paying, I didn't want people to stop coming. And if they were paying out of their pocket first, they just knew when the insurance company stopped paying, they would just continue to keep paying out of their pocket and continue their chiropractic care. That was the thinking. And I would say that to me is a better model. I've coached a lot of chiropractors who are in the insurance model, and very frankly, they struggle because they don't know when they're getting paid, and then patients are quitting all the time. So I would say the more you can eliminate that, the better.
Well,
And
I can tell you as an example. So when I came from BC, I was in British Columbia when the government changed how a lot of government plans used to have some sort of funding for chiropractic care, and it was always something ridiculous, like $10 a visit up to a certain amount or something like that. So I was in BC when that got removed. So when I came out to Ontario, we just made the decision that, hey, you pay the fee, and then we had OHIP writing checks to all of our different patients. We'd still do the submission to OHIP, but the money was always the same over our front desk. And so then when OHIP was they removed their coverage for chiropractic, where a lot of other like a lot of other practices would see a dip because now it's a whole change in behavior, we saw zero. So again, it's a lot of it's way more of its mentality than it is the actual dollars and cents.
I would say, guys, it all comes down to your commitment, your vision, and your patient education. And if you can educate your patients as to who you are, what you're delivering, what you're providing, and this is why, and be so committed to that, you're going to attract people into that world. And then you can set the rules that you want to set. So, and again, any type of
I'll add to it, and I don't want to relate over to that, but for those who are doing MBAs and maybe has a wellness center, because it applies to many other services, not just yourself. So you can't opt out because it affects too many other people. You can, and that's what I was trying to get to help, because you still want to, even if you're doing a payment plan, but they're on MBA, they're paying you directly, you can bill differently because the patient's only going to get $46 back for the adjustment, but then you can charge the $14 for soft tissue, mobilization, patient education. So you change your postings to adjustment first, and then add soft tissue mobilization, patient education, or neuro, and you can neuro training, and then you can have the total up to $60. So the patient can then get $60 back, regardless if you are doing it like direct billing to insurance, or if you are having the patient pay, you're still trying to get the patient to maximize their coverage.
So payment inquiries can be done at set times. So if anybody had a payment inquiry, we didn't want to clog up the front desk with them asking questions about their payments. So one of two things would happen. If there was a CA available to take them into a back room to talk about and show them their account in a private setting, then we would do it that way. Or we would set up a time we can do that, whether it be by some sort of a Zoom call or over the phone, or set up a time privately in the office. So we didn't want to clog up the flow with people asking about payment inquiries at the front desk or making special arrangements at the front desk.
We also label one CA as our financial CA, so that's the person the question has to go through. And for us, it's Camille. And so if she's not there in the shift, they're like, we're going to get this Camille. She's going to contact you. And that's usually by phone call. And if it needs to be an in-person one, she'll schedule a time in shift where we have another CA that can be running the front desk. And she can sit down, have a whatever in a private room, 5 or 10 minute conversation.
Awesome. Okay. And then when you start doing, communication reminders, obviously, and I think most people here are using automated text message reminders to send out to patients, whatever software you're using, Sked or Review Wave or whatever the case is. Patient education portal to help them to understand the regular stuff. So if you have a video playing in your office with regular patient information education, you could have video demos for home care. I mean, obviously there's stuff on different websites, Max Living website and so on. Those are great, but I would honestly make your own. Like that's probably the easiest way. The other thing is that, and I know some of you do a home care class. So for all of your new patients for the week or every other week, you have a home care class where you bring them in and do it in a group setting. Again, very time efficient. So you're not repeating yourself 2 or 3 times a day or multiple times a week. That video testimonial thing is, again, very important. Having systems to ask for reviews, automated review requests, again, very important. Videos about upcoming events or even flyers about upcoming events, having them all pre-printed and at a place where people can be taking them, or a staff member can be regularly giving them to people as they come in and out. And then just chiropractic education tips all the time, whether it be brochures or pamphlets, but have systems in place that you're actually passing those out. To have them sitting in a pamphlet folder on the wall, hoping that people are going to take them, it doesn't work. So just make sure that people are getting them regularly. And then the digital recall for lapsed patients. So whether it's an email or text message campaign to recall or rebook inactive patients, an email newsletter, whatever that may be. Again, these are all worthwhile to rather than go through a recall list or having a staff member go through a recall list regularly, these are good things to have in place on a regular basis. And then create the culture. So, the check-in, check-out flow, make sure that you're doing a bird's eye glance of what happens in your office. And this is one of the things we would do on a monthly basis for our staff meeting is we would have the staff, literally, we would walk out to the parking lot and walk through as if we were a patient. So we'd walk up the front sidewalk and we would observe what things look terrible. What do we need to address? Are there cobwebs in the, under the balcony or whatever the case is? Does it need to be painted? How's the garden look? We're looking at things to make sure that the flow is good. And what happens when somebody comes to the front desk? Does it, we would take that perspective. Does it look messy? Are there papers everywhere? If we had a product shelf, does our product shelf look good? Is it dusty? Is there a water cooler? Is it accessible? If somebody comes into the front desk and then wants to get water, is it interfering with things? Is there a kids area? Are the kids getting in the way if they're playing in the kids area, or are there toys everywhere? Whatever that is. And so it was a great routine that we did on a regular basis because it would always identify things that would slow us down. And so we would obviously make the change. So make sure you're making your waiting area, your hot seat area very relaxed so that if you are busy and people do have to wait, they're not getting stressed out. So whether you have those videos playing, music playing, whatever that is, offer free Wi-Fi, charging ports for their phones, make sure it's a place that people don't mind hanging out with. So short waits are much more acceptable in a pleasant space. One of the things I talked about recently was don't be afraid, for new patients to offer them a bottle of water or offer them maybe a protein bar or something, some sort of snack or something while they're waiting. Again, make their experience, wow them a little bit and make it very enjoyable. Make it a place that people go, wow, that was a really different experience. Okay, let's go into adjustment times. So again, define your adjustment times. And here's a big thing to look at. We talk about this all the time, is that the A, B, C of the adjustment time. The part A is when you walk into the room and it's the interaction before you start adjusting them. Part B is the adjustment start to finish. And part C is the closing. After you finish your adjustment to the time that you're actually leaving the adjustment area. Analyze those times. And typically it's part A that's the longest part of that patient visit. So try to make sure you're intentional with your wording and stop using the, hey, how are you doing? Because again, you're opening the door. So start working on those. And you can have a CA just randomly time you and figure out how long you're spending in part A, part B, part C on average. And then you can work on that. Adjust less. Many of you are adjusting way, way, way too much. You don't need to adjust every single bone in the spinal column. Start limiting your adjustments to 4 or less. Find the primary subluxation and adjust the primary subluxation. It's okay to make one adjustment and say, power's on, that's it. It's okay to do that. And that can be very, very powerful. Um, if you're doing modalities, have a separate visit for modalities, or have the person go to a separate space, or have a team member provide those modalities so the doctor's not doing it. And remember, you are not a therapist. You are a doctor of chiropractic. Leave the soft tissue work to the therapist. You should not be doing soft tissue. So if you find you're rubbing and massaging and doing some cupping or whatever it is you're doing, other than the adjustment or in addition to the adjustment, that's something you really need to minimize or eliminate.
I'll just say for associates, like in training associates, we just like there needs to be a pattern to every adjustment. So it is always, the warm, loud hello. It is the adjustment, some sort of ending statement, whether it's about a workshop coming up, this adjustment's gonna, have you playing with your grandkids when you're 80, like whatever their hot button is. There's got to be there, so there's always a pattern to the adjustment. And there's usually a Rolodex of answers, so it's not the same thing to everybody. But I'll tell you, I open every single adjustment virtually the same. It's like, great to see you today, Colin. Good to see you again, Stephen. It's very simple, and we're into adjusting. And it might be simply, we got your next re-exam on Wednesday when you see it. There's something, it's very simple. You want to get out of having to be consciously thinking about things where you can more be like present with the patient, innate to innate for the adjustment. So I'd think about what the routine is. But Colin's right. The worst possible thing to ask somebody is, how's it going today? Because who knows what's coming next. And if they have an issue, they're going to bring it up. You don't have to ask them, how's it going? Um, but if it is the how's it going, likely what's coming out of their mouth is not going to help their adjustment.
And that it just comes down to, and listen, I know it's hard. Like that's difficult. But if you have a plan, if you have something that you're intentionally going to say as you walk into the room, like, hey Bob, great to see you. I got a great story for you today. Hey Bob, great to see you. Let's get your power turned on. Whatever that is, have it in your mind, prepare for it before the shift. So it's on the tip of your tongue. So you're ready to start using it. If you don't do that, you're going to slip back into the, hey, how are you doing? Okay, last couple things here. So technology and systems integration, again, video for ongoing education, maybe even sending regular videos or a pre-re-exam video. Use virtual assistants. A lot of people that I talk to and a lot of coaching clients will have a virtual CA that will take the stress off your team members. And we actually have one that works for some of our clients that calls people in the evening. So whether it's reminder calls for their new patient appointment or whether it's booking leads into the new patient, and she'll call them, between 5 and 9 p.m. in the evening when you guys are at home with your families. So that's, again, a great time to get in touch with people. So having that virtual assistant, it can be really helpful and take a lot of stress off of your team and help you be more efficient. Well, I hope this was helpful. And I would just say that no matter where you are in practice, so whether you're seeing, 50 people a week or whether you're seeing 800 people a week, there's always room for improvement. So there's things that you do now that have limited you to where you're at, no matter what volume you're at. So, there's always ways that you can get better and be more efficient, serve more people, get your hands on more people, and obviously increase your income. So there's lots of ways to do that. So start looking at it from a bird's eye view. If you need somebody else to take a look at it to identify things that you're just overlooking, then Brian and I and Dr. Justine are happy to help you try to identify these things.